Today we're creating a really cool movement effect in Photoshop. It's really simple and it can be done on any image. So here we are in Photoshop. Now, I chose an image where our subject is naturally creating a pose that lends itself to a little bit of motion. So here's how we get this effect. Basically, just click on your background layer. We're gonna go to select up at the top and then down to select subject. Perfect. You're gonna see that's gonna automatically select your subject out. You may have to refine it. You can see like right here, it's not the best selection in the world. You can refine it using a refine edge, but basically, once you have your selection, all you need to do is click on your background layer and hit Control or Command J. So you should have your background and a layer 1, and then on this layer 1, because you hit Control or Command J, it duplicated what was ever in that selection onto this new layer. So if I just click here and drag with the move tool, you can see, yep, now we have another subject. All right, let's hit undo, and we are perfectly set up for this effect. I'm just gonna go ahead and double click this layer. We're gonna call this subject, and this should be basically in the exact same place as the background layer. So if I zoom in here, turn this off or on, it basically doesn't do anything. That's exactly how we want it. Now, the next step is we're going to duplicate this and then to apply a warp to that duplicate. So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. We're gonna click on the subject. I'm gonna hit Control or Command J, okay? And you can see it creates subject copy. I'm gonna just call this warp 01, and then we're gonna put it underneath the subject. So we want the final image of the subject to be on the top layer, and then all of our warps are going to be under that. Okay, now with this warp 01 layer selected, super easy from here. Hit Control or Command T for your transform, then we're gonna right click and go down to where it says warp. There we go, warp. Now let's go ahead and zoom in right up here. You can see we have our warp grid, and I can just simply click in here and start warping this out, which is going to like basically make it look like we have a little bit of movement. And because I'm using warp, you can see like it leaves this area alone. Like, of course you can do the feed, you can do really wherever you want. In this image, I think it makes sense to do the hand up there, and then we're gonna do the hand right down there as well. So you're seeing like the beginning of this effect. Let's go ahead and hit enter. So now that we have our first warp effect, you can see how it looks here on the hand. We're just gonna lower this opacity. So here up where it says opacity, let's just click there. I'm gonna type in 80 and hit enter. So we have like 80% opacity now instead of 100%. Okay, and that's the beginning of our look. All we have to do is duplicate this here and basically change the transparency and change the warp. So let's try it again. Now I'm gonna hit Control or Command J, this time on warp 01, Control or Command J. We're gonna call this warp 02, and then the secret is to put it underneath. So every time you do a duplicate, you gotta put it underneath the previous one. Okay, and then from here, like literally it's the same. Control or Command T, right click, and we go down to warp. Perfect. And then you can just kind of bring it out to here. And I'm trying to maintain like equal-ish distance between these three. There we go, something like that. Hit enter. And then the opacity, let's try 60%. There we go, so you can kind of see the effect. We'll do it again. So warp 02, Control the Command J to duplicate that. Let's put it underneath, and we'll call this warp 03. Control or Command T, right click, go down to warp. There we go. And we've got something like that down there. And up here, we've got something like this up here. And then we can change our opacity. You know what? You can change these opacities at any time. Let me try like 30%. This one will try like, I don't know, 50%. And this one will try 70%. I like that a little bit better. I think that's working. All right, let's do one more. Warp 03, Control or Command J to duplicate that. Put it underneath it, always put it underneath it, and then we'll just rename this warp 04. Control or Command T, right click, warp, okay, bring it down there, boop, the hand, bring it down there, and then this will just be 10%. There we go. So we have like our really pretty cool effect, honestly. Like, I am totally down with this. I like that we have total control over this. We can turn any of these off or on at any time. If I wanted to, like, let's say we wanted to exaggerate this, okay? Let's just try, I'm gonna select all those and hit Control or Command G to group them all together. All right, I'm gonna call this subject 01. Now, if I hit Control or Command J to just duplicate that whole thing, I'm gonna just call this subject 02. We'll make subject 01 invisible, and then check this out. I can go here and let's start at the bottom, Control-Command-T, right click, go to warp. I can like warp this out. So you can have like more or less of this effect, basically is kind of what I'm getting at. All right, let's do this relatively quickly. Basically the same type of thing, but I'm fading it out over like a longer period of time, or like more space. Space, time, continuum, messing with reality. That's my new show that I'm making. All right, there we go. Let's hit enter there. So you can see I just kind of like change this effect. So if I go back up here, I've got, let's zoom in just so you can see this arm. This is our subject 1 with like not a ton of travel there, and then subject 2 with a little bit more travel in that, which is kind of cool. And then if you want to take this a little farther, let's just call this subject 03, and we'll make that invisible now. If you want to take this effect a little bit farther and actually introduce a little motion blur, you can do that. So like warp 04, keep in mind we're on the 3rd iteration of this. We'll go to filter, down here to blur, and we'll go to motion blur. There we go. And let's just go ahead and give it a little bit motion blur, and you can see a nice preview here. If I go too far, it's like can't see anything right now, but there we go. We got a little bit of motion blur there. Control-Command, there we go. Click on the next one, filter, blur, motion blur. There we go. A little bit less blur. There we go. Go to this one, filter, blur, motion blur. I gotta admit, this process is a little bit repetitive, but it's kind of cool that you can do this. All right, Control-Command-T. Oh, sorry, filter. What am I doing here? Filter, blur, motion blur. I've confused myself in my own little world up here. All right, there we go. So I added a little bit of motion blur, so it kind of fades from blurry into in focus as well. So not only do we have like the actual like opacity and the movement down there, but the fade, and that actually looks pretty cool. Like right here, I think that did like a pretty cool effect. It almost looks like a long exposure strobe effect in camera. Notice how like we didn't like warp the feet at all on purpose. So the feet just look exactly like how they were to begin with. They're in the same exact place. So really we have complete control over what actually moves throughout the photo, and super cool effect, nice and easy. So again, we have our first version here. There we go. We'll just zoom in so we can just see this hand. A little less movement, a little bit more movement, and then more movement with that blur. All basically done with the same effect. I think I like this second one here. It looks super cool. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget you can download all of these sample files and you can follow along right on Phlearn.com. Just click on the link right down below. Thanks again. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye everyone.